The ridge wakes in pre-dawn cold. Wind scraping rock and thin air burning the lungs. SGT. Ashley Carter lies prone behind granite. Body flat. Cheek settled to a Leupold Mark 4, while SSG Ethan Brooks slides in beside her as spotter. In the valley, a Navy SEAL element under CMDR. Mason Reed hugs broken walls and waits for a break in fire. The time reads 5:48 a.m. in her head as she breathes, listens, and lets the darkness settle into shapes she can trust. Primary net on a PRC 163 runs clean. Alternate is a satellite push to talk that hums in reserve. Contingency is a short data burst ready to mark grid. And emergency is an IR strobe taped down for last resort. Authentication comes across the net as Alpha 3. And her reply returns as Bravo 7. She speaks the status as Overwatch is green and watches tracers arc wide of the team below. Nothing flashy. Only procedure moving like a metronome inside the cold. She builds the shot with the M2010 enhanced sniper rifle in 300 Win Mag. Dials elevation from dope. Holds for wind off the Mirage. And applies the cosine for the angle across the cut. The laser gives 1,150 meters and her shoulder finds the stock like it has been there forever. Brooks breathes once and gives the spotter call, send it. Calm and even. She presses the trigger straight back and lets a controlled suppressive round open a narrow window for movement. No more than needed, and just enough to matter. FOB Falcon wakes slow at 6:30 a.m. The air cool and still. The memorial wall holds the light like water. SGT. Ashley Carter. A 35 series military intelligence NCO in SIGINT rests her fingertips on cold metal. She traces the letters of Captain Dylan Carter and pauses at the small star cut beside his name. Months earlier, a mission report reduced his death to an equipment malfunction. She never believed the line. On night shift, she logged an unsecured pattern that bled into traffic. A dirty carrier sliding under the net. The printout lives folded in her ballistic notebook, edges worn from being opened and closed in quiet corners. Around her, the base runs on dust. Metal. And hurry. Rangers and Marines pass with rucks and dry humor, measuring respect by dirt and sweat. She takes it in without heat. Used to being the screen person who briefs and fades. She carries the notebook, listens more than she speaks, and keeps her answers short. She breathes once and sets the memory in order. Dylan taught her that truth hides in silence, and that patience is a form of courage. Chow will be quick. Conversation clipped. Tasks stacked from 700 to 1800, but purpose steadies her hands. She chooses to move forward with discipline, to clear a name and follow a thread that points to a breach. At 6:45 a.m., she leaves the wall and tucks the notebook under her arm. She meets the day with steady breath and intent. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the memo lands on SGT, Ashley Carter's desk with Colonel Lee's. Laura Whitaker's approval and a line that opportunity rarely comes twice. The words feel plain and heavy, like a ruck you choose to lift. Advanced combat marksmanship is not a comfort move for a 35 series SIGINT NCO, but the path makes sense in her bones. She signs, files her copy, and adds a quiet note in the ballistic notebook that once belonged to Capt. Dylan Carter. At 0715 the next morning, a UH-60M lifts off the pad in a hot gust that tastes like dust and hydraulic heat. The cabin smells of gun oil, canvas, and sweat. Sling seats flex under rucks, and clipped intercom chatter rides under the rotor thrum. A mix of Rangers and Marines shares the bird on a rotation flight. Boots hooked, eyes forward. The desert shrinks as they climb toward cold gray mountains that look close and far at the same time. Two soldiers glance at her MI patch, then look away with the kind of judgment that never needs words. She keeps her gaze on straps and buckles, checks the notebook pressed to her thigh, and runs a simple plan in her head: prove value through discipline. Clean process. and data-backed marksmanship, talk less, do more. And let results carry the weight. The aircraft noses north, and the air cools through the open ramp. Carter thinks about a strange, unsecured pattern that once bled into a net and would not leave her mind. The thread starts there and pulls her into higher ground where wind decides and numbers matter. She leans back into the sling, breath steady, and lets focus narrow to the work in front of her. Camp Sentinel sits in a cold mountain valley where sound carries, firing echoes roll off, rock and frost whitens the gravel. A small class files off the truck, gear clanking, breath turning to fog that hangs in the thin air. SGT. Ashley Carter shoulders her ruck and keeps a steady pace toward the concrete hall. Inside, light hums over a room built for function. Cole, Laura Whitaker stands at the front and delivers the welcome brief in a voice that wastes nothing. The washout rate sits north of 80%, and the point is clear. This is a test of focus under stress, not a shooting class. The curriculum board lists Phase 2, the Mountain Operations Module, mobility on steep ground, cold weather endurance, and high-angle marksmanship are the pillars. No one confuses it with Ranger School because the scope and standards are different. The language stays precise with ranks and titles used cleanly. Instructors watch more than they speak. Candidates size one another up without words. Eyes on boots, hands, and how people handle weight. Carter catches a few skeptical looks at her MI patch and lets them pass. She keeps her eyes on process and standards posted by the door. The daily rhythm goes up on the whiteboard. 043, 0 wake, 050 pints. Heard as 5 o'clock a.m., 0545 chow, and 0630 on range. Heard as 5:45 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. Followed by long blocks of drills and ruck movement in freezing wind. Small details mark the day as real. Numb fingers fight a stubborn sling swivel until warmth returns. The smell of CLP lifts from a bench while the thin air steals breath if you forget to pace it. Short exchanges carry everything that needs to be said. Carter steps back into the cold with quiet resolve. She accepts the rules of this place without complaint. Value will come from discipline and clean execution, not talk. The pressure builds, and she is ready to meet it head-on. The arms room smells like CLP and concrete. SGT. Ashley Carter presents a training authorization signed by Curl Blank, Laura Whitaker. An armorer checks the M2010 Enhanced Sniper Rifle serial number, logs a hand receipt, and inspects the bolt face and bore under white light. A bipod and sling slide across the counter with a quiet reminder that issue runs through this room for accountability and that weapons are never mailed to barracks. Another armorer confirms the Leupold Mark 4 optic tracks clean. He notes turret movement and returns the rifle with a nod. CMDAR. Mason Reed steps in. Naive opiet. Eyes catching the name capped. Dylan Carter, on the worn ballistic notebook. He places a fresh dope book beside it and sets report time for Range 3 at 0630 a.m. Ashley clears a bench and lays a towel flat. She field strips the M2010 with efficient hands, sets the bolt aside, and checks locking lugs for wear. A patch runs down the bore until it comes out clean. Then a thin film of CLP follows. She reassembles, seats the optic caps, confirms turret 0, and wipes the last fingerprints from the metal. Paperwork closes with initials and a date. Then the rifle goes into a case with sling and bipods stowed. The room hums with small sounds of work and habit. Ashley secures the notebook and the new dope book, the weight familiar against her kit. She steps out into the corridor with calm breath and a plan to prove value through clean execution rather than talk. Morning lays thin light over Range 3 as frost bites the gravel and cloth. Ski. Ashley Carter moves with quiet precision, setting down the M2010 Enhanced Sniper Rifle in 300 Win Mag, checking the Leupold Mark 4 turrets, and placing a laser rangefinder within easy reach. A Kestrel 5000, 700 rides on a lanyard. its screen cold and clear. A rolled jacket becomes a compact rear bag that settles under the stock like it belongs there. At 300 meters, she builds prone with natural point of aim. Tous flat. Elbows planted. Sling snug. She checks level. Relaxes into the rifle. And smooths her breathing until the reticle steadies. The trigger breaks as a surprise, and the first impact lands where it should. The spotter confirming in short words and noting a slight correction. 4 more shots follow into a tight 5-round group that looks like a single thought. They push to 600 meters. Carter dials elevation from dope, holds wind off a steady left-to-right push, red from mirage, and watches Trace ride the path she wants. Impacts stack with 1 correction of left 0.3 mil and a calm re-engage. The group holds under 1 MOA without drama. Steel ringing flat in the cold air, while an instructor and CMDAR, Mason Reed, watch from behind the line and write nothing more than numbers. At 800 meters, the light goes flat and the wind shifts. She waits for a repeatable pattern, checks the kestrel, nudges the hold, and lets the trigger break clean. 5 shots move in a measured cadence. 4, inside the vital zone with 1 close miss called as it leaves the barrel. Reed gives a small nod that means data captured, nothing more. The lane chief posts a matter-of-fact tasking for mountain operations tomorrow at first light. And no praise follows. Results do the talking as Carter safes the rifle and packs for Colderad. Steeper ground. Wake comes at 0430 a.m. and the barracks stirs without talk. By 0500 a.m., PT bites into legs and lungs while frost clings to railings. Chow, at 0545 a.m., is hot and fast. Then rucks go on and buckles snap. The trail rises steep and icy under a 60-pound load, wind cutting and breath going thin if you rush. SGT, Ashley Carter keeps cadence with small, even steps. She uses poles of habit to move the weight, chest rising slow, hands numb then warming in waves. Instructors pace the column and save words for when they matter. The day stretches into a white rim of cold that teaches patience. Mist hangs over the range when live fire lanes start. Pop-up targets lift and drop on timers while safety lines stay strict and visible. Carter trims movement and builds a position once, then runs it, making rounds count and calling her own misses. The steel answers with a flat ring that cuts through fog. Night falls, and a ranger platoon moves to set Overwatch on a ridgeline. Carter serves as spotter and rides glass on a dark tree line where wind pushes left to right. A shape holds still against the pattern. Not wind. Not drift. Just wrong. She passes a short warning in plain brevity and returns to scanning. The platoon shifts without noise, wedge folding to line where the cover widens. Then, easing to echelon along the slope, the ambush dies in its cradle as fields of fire change and angles vanish. No one celebrates. The movement simply continues. Carter notes the lesson and resets her focus. Back at the command tent, Cole, Laura Whitaker gives a measured nod that her eyes likely saved lives. CMDR. Mason Reed remains steady and says that one good call is not the standard. Then moves to the next task. Carter accepts the weight of that line and the work ahead. She shoulders her ruck and steps back into the cold, with discipline intact. 3 weeks into the course, the orders arrive without ceremony. SGT. Ashley Carter is assigned to a 5-day mountain operation at the request of CMDAR, Mason Reed, and she accepts it as a professional step, not a story. The risks are clear on paper and clearer in the terrain model. She packs with method, checks, batteries, and optics, and closes the notebook that holds the lines she means to follow. At 020 inches the morning, an MH-47G from the 160th SOAR rides nap of the earth into a cold valley. Red cabin lights wash over helmets and straps while the rotors push heavy air through the frame. The ramp brief is short and exact, with stick order, altitude, and signals. The SEAL element inserts first by fast rope, then Carter and SSG, Ethan Brooks descend on the next stick with rucks, rifle cases, and comms. They move off the LZ low and slow, establish an Overwatch position on high ground that looks into a compound roughly 2 kilometers away, and set roles. Brooks is primary sniper. Carter is observer and secondary shooter, and she handles most spotting calls, logs, and environmental data. Frost glazes the optic in the first hour, and the thin air reminds them to pace every movement. Cold settles into straps and stays unless you keep your blood moving. 2 quiet days follow with disciplined observation. They map guard patterns, routes, and choke points, mark grids, and pass only what the plan requires. Pace stays clean with primary voice. Alternate satellite push to talk, contingency data pings, and emergency IR kept dark unless needed. Noise and light discipline hold tight, and the hide remains small and still. Pressure builds without anyone saying it. The team is set, and patience does the work of protection as the valley waits. Dawn on day 3 paints the ridge, a flat gray. A patrol slides below the briefed boundary. Wrong angle, wrong timing. Static bleeds onto the alternate net in a pattern that matches the interference Carter logged months ago. The first rounds crack into rock and chip the ledge into dust. SSG, Ethan Brooks takes a round high through the shoulder and drops behind a scrub of stone. SGT, Ashley Carter drags him upslope to a narrow rise. Noise and light kept tight. Movement small. She runs march on instinct. Massive bleed first. Pressure dressing seated hard. Tourniquet staged, but not cranked, unless the dressing fails. Airway is clear. Breathing even but fast. Chest checked for holes. Circulation is good enough for the moment. Hypothermia prevented with a shell layer tucked around him. Pain meds hold until the fight allows it. She gives him the spotter role with a short plan and a steadier field of view. Carter snaps the M2010 onto bipod and builds a hasty hide. Rear bag from a rolled layer settling the stock. Primary net is down. Alternate satellite push to talk goes live. Contingency is a short grid sent as an ATAC marker. Emergency IR stays dark unless extraction becomes urgent. An authentication challenge comes across as Sierra 1, and she returns the correct reply as Lima 4. Overwatch status follows in clean. Spare words. Smoke goes once. Small and precise. Just to screen a 3-step move to better cover. She checks the valley for the SEAL element and holds fire until movement exposes a rifle muzzle. One suppressive round pushes heads low. A second controlled shot clips a firing position enough to break rhythm. Nothing more than needed. Brooks calls wind in short phrases and marks impacts with calm corrections. Carter limits shots and resets the lane. Then watches the patrol stall and probe for angles they no longer hold. The ridge settles to a tense quiet that fools no one. Brooks is bandaged and tracking. Carter holds the net. And the threat does not vanish. The day is not won. First light brushes the ridge and turns frost to a dull sparkle. SGT. Ashley Carter and SSG Ethan Brooks lie in a hasty hide that fits the rock and the cold. In the valley, a SEAL element under CMDDAR. Mason Reed sits pinned by fire from a northern slope. Breath sounds loud until she slows it down. The laser rangefinder settles the number at 1,150 meters. The M2010 enhanced sniper rifle in 300 Win Mag rests steady. Leupold Mark, 4 glass clear enough for work. MK248 Mod 1 rides the magazine with a clean feed. The envelope is real, and Carter treats it that way. She pulls dope from the Kestrel and dials elevation. Mirage shows a left-to-right push, and Trace confirms drift. Cosine for angle goes into the math, and she sets a quiet hold. Brooks watches wind and terrain and keeps the talk spare. Brooks calls left 0.5 mil hold. He follows with impact and a calm add 0.2 mil. He ends with send it and leaves the air clear. Carter breaks the trigger with a true surprise and places the first round to pin heads and open a movement window. The second shot is earned, not guessed. A shooter exposes too much shoulder and helmet and pays for impatience. Carter lets the reticle float, holds her wind, and settles the dot through recoil. The valley shifts as pressure drops a notch. A mounted firing position rakes the cover and needs attention. Carter places a controlled third round that chews hardware and cuts the rate of fire. She does not chase theatrics. She watches the hillside go from loud to workable. Radio traffic stays tight and clean. An authentication challenge arrives from Reed, and Carter returns the correct reply, with Overwatch green and a concise move east to the ravine. A secondary landing zone clears. Primary nets stabilize, while alternate stays ready and contingency markers sit prepped if the plan bends. Rotor noise grows from the west, and the MH-47G calls its presence in dust and wind. The SEALs move under cover and Carter holds space with 1 or 2 area denial shots. She lets the rifle settle as the team lifts out. No speeches, only breath and the click of a safe. Fluorescent light hums over the debrief room, and the air feels still. Colas. Laura Whitaker stands at the front while CM Dar. Mason Reed waits with his arm in a sling, and the SEAL element lines the wall. SGT. Ashley Carter steps forward with calm hands and a clear breath. She explains how the shots were built with elevation taken from dope, recorded during training and verified on the ridge. Windrift came from mirage, and trace watched through glass. Then checked against what the terrain told her. She added a cosine adjustment for the shooting angle and notes that Coriolis at that distance was minimal. She presents a clean copy of a prior intercept from months before. The document shows an unsecured pattern that rode under friendly traffic in a way that never left her mind. The interference heard on the alternate net during the fight matches that pattern and suggests a breach that put people at risk. A joint inquiry begins with Army CID, NCIS, and JSOC J2X seated around a table that fills with logs and tasking sheets. Technical teams pull comms, records, and map access to tactical frequencies. Interviews focus on a small circle of personnel who touched those nets. Within days, 2 individuals are detained based on corroborated evidence that ties access, timing, and the pattern together. No one turns the room into a courtroom. The process stays quiet and steady, and the work keeps moving. CMDR. Reed shifts tone in a professional way and files an official recommendation that Carter assist the inquiry because her analysis and judgment proved sound. He submits a second recommendation that she attend the U.S. Army Sniper Course at Fort Moore in Georgia. The paperwork lands clean and complete. The room settles into weighted silence as the implications take shape. Carter understands that the issue runs beyond a single mission. This is about protecting teams who trust the net and expect it to hold. Sunrise slides across Fob Falcon, and the memorial wall holds the pale light. SGT. Ashley Carter walks to the metal and finds the small star etched beside the name of Captain. Dylan Carter, after the inquiry, confirmed the breach. The air is cool and quiet, and the bass moves in low rhythms behind her. She stands still and lets a slow breath set the day. CMDR. Mason Reed approaches in uniform and hands her a sealed envelope with formal orders to the U.S. Army Sniper Course at Fort Moore in Georgia. Report time Su Nu Leim. His remark is brief and professional, that no one will go easy. She answers with a nod that says she understands and that the standard is the point. Protocol is clean, and the moment passes without ceremony. She shoulders the M2010 and touches the letters again. Feeling the cut edges under her glove, the horizon lifts in a thin line and the light sharpens the names. She turns toward the work ahead with a calm that feels earned. Inside her own head, she names the lesson that the most important target is often the truth you refuse to ignore.